community thinks there's something you need, you're not allowed to ask for it or receive from outside a religious community. That everyone contributes to the community what you can contribute and receives from the community what you need. Incidentally, that direct quote appears in Das Kapital by Karl Marx. Unfortunately, he doesn't quote Benedict where it comes from, but it appears in his thing. Chastity requires one to be faithful to the sexual life that one has chosen, whether it's marriage or celibacy. The important thing about chastity is that when I was first in the seminary, one of the things that they were very concerned about was what they called particular friendships. And so they're concerned about particular friendships. They kept priests from having close friends when they were going through the seminary. They've since really changed that. Because I think every one of us has at one time or another met a priest who was very lonely and bitter in later life, and actually has so constructed his life no one would want contact with him. And they cultivated that in the seminaries originally. And they don't now, because they realize part of being able to, I think part of actually living celibacy is to know what you give up and what you don't give up. You know, and what you don't give up is friendships with people, because that will deform you. What you give up is sexual contact with people, but you don't give up contact with people. You have to be very careful about these things. And so a violation of celibacy is a person who has a lack of healthy relationships with other people. That is as much a violation of celibacy as is adultery. Because those are all things you try and do. So anyway, he wanted chastity to bring balance. And finally, obedience. Obedience is the requirement that you and I sacrifice our will to the will of God. And I want you to understand, it is very easy to misunderstand obedience as obedience being to another person. And obedience is really to the will of God. Like I'll give you an example. When you become a religious, you go through an entire year studying the vows. And at the end of the year, they give you a test, and you go in individually. One of the things they'll give you in the test is, if a superior orders you in writing to do X, and it violates your conscience, what will you do? If you say you'll do X, they can't let you take the vows. You're forbidden to take the vows if you say you'll violate your conscience, because your obedience is primarily to God, as it is expressed in the superior, or in my position, as it is expressed in the bishop, or in a child, as it is expressed in a parent, or in a business, as it is expressed in your boss. But it is always an obedience to God, not to the individual. That's one of the great problems in Germany. Incidentally, I think it's still a problem in Germany. Germans have this unbelievable sense of obedience to an authority. And to me personally, that's what created Hitler. Hitler was created by that misunderstanding of obedience. When people come to me in the confessional, if anyone over the age of 10 confesses I was disobedient to my parents, I always correct them. You're not bound to your parents by obedience. You're bound by obedience to God. What did you do? Well, my mother told me to take the trash out, and I didn't do it. The sin you committed was not contributing to the running of the household. Everyone who lives in the house must contribute to running that house, and if your contribution is emptying the trash and you don't, that's your sin. Your mother told you what your job was to keep the household, but it's not obedience you've broken. It's contributing to the household you've broken. And it's very important to understand that. I'll tell you a story about German obedience. I don't know how many have been to Germany, but one of the things that most amuses me is to be on a bus. Their buses are long, usually connected two-piece buses, and the place where you put the money is in the center, and you can enter the bus at the beginning or the end. The driver is in a little tiny cage up front, and you have basically no contact with him at all. And you will watch every single person who gets on, back of the bus or anything, always puts a coin in. If you don't pay when you get on the bus and just go sit down, you will have the undivided attention of every single person in the bus. And the only people I've ever seen sit down without paying are people who sat down in order to get the coin out of their wallet or to get it out of their purse. I've never seen anyone skip paying, you know. But I look at that in the United States. In the United States, a lot of people wouldn't pay. That wouldn't be the problem. In the United States, someone would come on and rip off that box and take it away. You know, that would be our problem. But there, everyone, this sense of obedience. Okay? So, to understand that those things together are the idea that we should have the will of God. You and I should never be a slave of our authorities. That's when the authority becomes its obedience to the authority. But the real purpose of the obedience is to get away from my will dominating me. Okay? My will cannot be allowed to be the thing that absolutely dominates me. And so we watch this in the community. And the final thing is stability. Stay in the particular place you are at. And there's I think it's an interesting thing to watch. I've watched in later life. I used to wonder about the vow of stability, but it's an interesting thing in a business, for instance. If you're working, you know, in a business and you know you've got another job, you deal with the people differently than if you know you're going to have to stay there and deal with them on an ongoing thing. And what the vow of stability was to keep them kind of in the relationship, in the community itself. So anyway, he put together this this idea, and the great legacy he left, again, was the rule, and every religious community and every gathering of people after that will all be a result of really what he does, whether you're talking an army, whether you're talking a religious community, or whatever. But from then on, they'll take that. And again, right now in the Catholic Church, we're looking for a person like Benedict, who in fact can put together a rule that will allow single men, single women, and married couples all to live in a single community. And we yet have someone to do that. The key to his spirituality, though, is this hospitality. He's incidentally the patron of everyone in the hospitality industry, whether you're a maid in a motel or whatever, that he is the patron of that business. So, in the practice of hospitality, I think that in a normal family, this is probably the spirituality that would fit naturally into any family. That just in the hospitality that with one another and this sort of thing, that you would encounter, you know, God in that way. Okay? I'm going to invite you over to the breakfast afterwards.